Hello Internet, welcome back to Thrums of Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the Abyss, about books, movies, music I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. My friend recently gave me this book, Ted Chiang, Exhalation. So I read it and I would like to give you my opinion on it. It's a book of speculative fiction short stories. You might compare it to the work of Ray Bradbury, I guess. Sometimes it reminds me a little bit also of Jeff Vandermeer, but with a less weird fiction aspect, slightly more kind of concrete and sci-fi influenced. Also obviously has a similarity to Black Mirror, the Netflix series, particularly in a couple of stories, and I'll come back to that. I will say, though, that Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror is much more pessimistic about people, their motivations and their tendencies, whilst Ted Chiang seems to have a kind of fundamental humanist streak running through a lot of these stories. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the stories and say a little bit about each one of them without giving spoilers and give my kind of view of them. And then at the end, I'll say what I think about the whole book. So the first story in the collection is called something about an alchemist, The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. This story is obviously influenced by 1001 Nights. It's told as if being narrated to a king by an unnamed narrator. It describes a story of a man who discovers a method of time travel, a kind of gate you can step through into your own past. This story brings up one of the core concepts that runs through the whole book, which is, do we live a deterministic life or do we have free will? So in this version of time travel that's in this story, you can't actually change the timeline. The timeline is always fixed, but you can learn more by moving to different points in a timeline. It's a playful story. It's just the right length. It has a very moving side to it. I found it quite kind of almost sentimental, but in a way that moved me. I liked it. I thought it was a really good opener. The second story is a story called Exhalation. It's the one that the book is named after. I'm not going to go into much depth to this story because it's a very kind of conceptual story, and the more I tell you about it, the more I will reduce your enjoyment if you read it. But it's about a mechanical being which must have been manufactured, trying to understand how it works and what its origins may be and what life is constructed of, or what is the element, the kind of foundational aspect of life. And through this, Chiang is kind of staging our own inability to understand our cognitive apparatus and our experience of life, our own subjectivity. One scene that I will mention is that he kind of, I think it's a male, but that actually might be a sexist assumption. The narrator, at least, sort of deconstructs her own head and kind of takes themselves apart at a certain point, and that visual image, very striking. Pretty good story on the whole, not as arresting as the first one, but good. The third story is called What's Expected of Us, and this is another one that is about free will or not. It's about a little machine that you press, but it always knows when you're going to press it, and it's just this idea that we could discover a technology that will show us or demonstrate to us in some way that we do not have free choice, we do not have free will, and how would people react to this. So it's just a little philosophical kind of thought experiment. It's nice, it's fine. And then the fourth story is the life cycle of software objects. Now, the life cycle of software objects is an interesting story because to me it has all of Ted Chiang's strengths and weaknesses. Like, the strengths are that the technological speculative part of the story is really like convincing. It's a story about people who've created digital intelligences, a certain kind of animal that they've then tried to kind of train and help develop over time, and the unexpected strengths and weaknesses that these creatures have, but also the issues of what happens when the company goes bust, or what happens when you can't update the operating system. So this is great, and also the kind of emotional, sensitive, humane, relational aspect of his writing is here, which is something that I think makes his work kind of appealing. There are some disturbing moments that he does really well in this story, but I think the issue is that his writing style is just kind of serviceably good. Like, he writes well enough to tell the stories and share the ideas, but he doesn't, in my opinion, write well enough to kind of hold the reader over the course of a longer story, a longer narrative. Or maybe that's unfair. Like, I was invested, but I found that the story meandered, that it didn't have a structure that really worked. It's like he just kept trying out different ideas. And what if this happened? What if this happened? And then what if this happened? And you were kind of invested in the characters, but then nothing really happened to them by the end. So I don't know. I kind of felt like, okay, the better stories in this collection are kind of where he gets in, presents the idea, shows you what it looks like, and then gets out. So the next one, Darcy's Patent Automatic Nanny, is kind of a sort of almost like a steampunk kind of thing about a guy in the Victorian era who built a nanny to look after children. It's kind of interesting. It's like playing around a little bit with behaviorism. I think it might be influenced by like behaviorist ideas of how to raise children. Also just like the impact of technology on human development. It's kind of cool. I like the fact that he was playing with tone, playing with voice, trying to write something that was more almost like a sort of faux museum text. So I think he did well on this one. The truth of the feeling, which is the next story, is a story that kind of stages what if we had a technology that could give us access to our memory objectively? And what would that mean in terms of our subjective experience of our life narrative? Like, we rewrite our life narrative to suit our view of ourselves. What would happen if we had a technology that was filming and cataloging everything that could just contradict us with the fact of the moment? This story is made of two stories, where one is a guy who is going through exactly this issue in terms of his life, because he now is seeing videos of what actually happened. And then another story about a tribe somewhere where a missionary comes and teaches this tribe to write and to use the written language, and how this shifts their culture. And there's a kind of like analogy between the two. I like the idea of this story. I don't think that he really pulled it off. I don't think that the story about the tribe effectively adds enough to the story or to the concept that it was worth weaving in through the text. I think this parable about the tribe learning to write is supposed to have been written by the narrator of the story, and at one point he tells you, the reader, directly, writing is also a technology, as if like you hadn't worked that out yet, and if you didn't understand that this was an analogy. But the analogy doesn't illuminate the idea of memory and video and subjectivity enough that it was worth including it when it wasn't particularly strong as a narrative, in my opinion. Another issue of this story is that Black Mirror has basically already done this exact story twice. It's followed though by my favourite in the collection, which is only a couple of pages long. This is called The Great Silence, and this is a short text narrated from the perspective of a parrot, soon to be extinct, lives in the rainforest. And this parrot says, humans have created a satellite dish to listen to the stars, to listen to alien species outside the planet. Yet here we are, the parrots, with vocal apparatus and cognitive apparatus, and they've never tried to learn to really know us. And yeah, I just think this story was elegant, excellent, moving, sad, but still has this sort of warm humanist aspect that a lot of Chiang stories seem to have. I really liked it. And again, it kind of confirms my feeling that he's better on the sprint than he is on the marathon. The penultimate story, Omphalos, I guess it's pronounced that way. It's a really interesting, strange concept. It's basically about a world which has found archaeological evidence that it was created at a certain point, because all of the evidence of aging in like fossils and trees and everything, they only go back to a certain point. Everything stops like 800 years or something before the start of the text. So they know that the world was created by God at this time. But then they have a kind of Copernican moment where they start to doubt whether humanity was really the reason for God's creation. I quite like this one. It's sort of about faith, about science, and about, in a similar way as the one about the parrots and some of the other stuff in the book, it's like gently questioning humanity's tendency to see itself as the center of creation. The last one, the title spells out this major theme of the book about free will and choice. It's called "Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom," and it's about a world in which a technology can connect you to an alternative timeline. So it's like there's like a sort of video device in which you can speak to what they call a paraself, a self on a timeline that has been split off by a quantum event. And the idea is that when this device is activated, it automatically creates this alternative timeline. So somebody in the alternative timeline is also operating one of these at the same time, and then you can speak to your alternative self. And Chiang plays with a lot of the different consequences of what this might mean, what might happen. Again, very speculative, very kind of exploratory. This, I think, is the best longer story in the collection. He manages to weave a more convincing narrative through his intellectual speculations and creates a character you can kind of invest in, who's genuinely flawed but is also interesting. It's a little bit of a sort of thriller heist. It could make a nice film, I think. I like this last story in the collection. So overall, I like the book. I think that Chiang is better, as I say, writing his shorter stories. He's better with his ideas, extremely imaginative, very intellectually inquisitive, and I think most of us would struggle to come up with one of the concepts that he has in this book, let alone all of them. And I like the way that he ties together his different disparate stories that are set in different times and with different types of characters, with ideas of questioning, what is consciousness, what is choice, what is free will, and also, how is human development and are human relationships influenced by the technology that grow out of our cultures, and why choose to create culture at all. So I think that this is very cool, and in some ways, he's drawing an analogy between storytelling as a technology, and these different kind of stories that grow out of the technology and the machinery within the different texts. Like the stories will make you see the world in a particular way, or shift the way that you think, or change the way that you feel, in the same way that these slightly strange, unique technological developments also do in the lives of the characters in the book. Anyway, have you read Ted Chiang? What do you think about the book? Did you enjoy it? I'm going to say it was a decent version of a tradition that was very popular from the early to the mid 20th century, and that you don't see as much now outside of, like TV shows like Black Mirror. So it was fun to read. I enjoyed it, and I'd love to hear from you what you thought of it.